My grandparents don't approve of my relationship with my black boyfriend and don't want me to marry him. I don't know what to do since I don't want to lose either of these people, my boyfriend and my grandparents. You're not marrying him, not while we're alive. That's what my grandmother said to me. She looked me dead in the eye, her hands shaking from age, but her voice steady as stone. My grandfather just nodded silently beside her, his lips pressed into a hard line. I sat there at their dining room table, frozen, my boyfriend's hand still clasped in mine under the tablecloth. He squeezed gently, but I could feel his own tension buzzing through his fingers. I never thought the people I loved the most would say something like that, but they did. And the silence that followed their words was so heavy, I felt like the air was being sucked right out of my chest. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or walk out. Instead, I just stared at them, my throat burning. That was the moment everything cracked, and I knew there was no going back. Okay, let me rewind a little bit. I'm 24F. My boyfriend, David, is 26M. We've been together almost 3 years now. He's kind, patient, funny, and he makes me feel safe in a way no one else ever has. From the very beginning, I could see a future with him. The only problem? My grandparents. They raised me for most of my life. My parents split when I was young, and both were too busy fighting their own battles to care for me properly. So my grandparents stepped in. They clothed me, fed me, sat through my school plays, held me when I cried. They were my everything. That's what makes this whole thing so unbearable. For a while, I kept my relationship with David quiet, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew my grandparents had old-fashioned views. They never said anything openly racist around me, but I'd hear the little remarks, the jokes about people who didn't look like us, the disapproving comments if they saw an interracial couple on TV. I told myself, they love me. When they meet David, they'll see he's different. They'll accept him. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first time I brought David to meet them, I thought things were going okay. My grandmother cooked dinner, my grandfather poured drinks, and they asked him polite questions about his job, his family, where he grew up. David was his usual charming self, smiling and answering with ease. But the second he left, the storm hit. My grandmother shut the door, turned to me, and said, "You can't be serious about him." I laughed nervously, thinking she meant his personality, or maybe that he wasn't good enough financially. I said, "Of course I'm serious. I love him." She didn't smile back. She just said, "We don't approve. You know why." I swear my stomach dropped to the floor. For months, I tried to brush it off. I thought maybe they'd soften with time. I kept inviting David over for small things, holidays, birthdays, even just tea. Every time, my grandparents would put on fake smiles for him, but behind closed doors, their words got sharper, colder. Think about your future kids. People will judge you. He doesn't belong in our family. Each sentence was like a knife to the chest. David told me, gently, "I don't want to come between you and them. I love you, but if being with me means losing them, I'll understand if you walk away." But the thought of losing him felt just as impossible as losing them. So I said nothing. I kept balancing on this breaking rope, pretending I could hold it all together. Until last week, when David proposed. It was simple, private, just us at the little park where we had our first date. He knelt down, ring in hand, his voice trembling as he asked me to marry him, and without hesitation, I said yes. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. But telling my grandparents shattered everything. That dinner, when I showed them the ring and told them the news, is when my grandmother gave me her ultimatum. And now here I am, caught between the two people who raised me and the man I want to spend my life with. Do I walk away from my family, or do I break the heart of the man I love? I don't know what to do. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the very next day, my grandfather called me. What he said made everything even more complicated. When my phone rang the next morning and I saw Grandpa flashing across the screen, I froze. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. My stomach was still raw from the dinner table blow-up the night before, my eyes puffy from crying into David's chest until I passed out. But something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said softly. There was silence at first, then I heard him clear his throat. "I didn't want to say this in front of your grandmother, but you need to think very carefully about what you're doing." My heart pounded. "Grandpa, I love him." He cut me off. "Love doesn't last. Family does." Those words stung more than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, but then he said something that chilled me. "If you go through with this, you're not welcome here anymore. No family holidays, no visits, nothing. And that's not just me. That's your grandmother too. You'll be cutting yourself off." I sat there silently, tears burning my eyes. Then he added, "But if you let him go now, we'll forget about it. We'll help you. You'll find someone else, someone more suitable." And just like that, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to call him back and say every cruel thing I was holding inside. But instead, I sat on the edge of my bed silent. When David came in and saw me crying, he didn't even ask. He just pulled me into his arms. His warmth, his steady heartbeat, it should have been enough to call me. But all I could hear were my grandfather's words repeating in my head like a curse. "You're not welcome here anymore." The next few days blurred together. My grandmother didn't call, but she sent a letter, a handwritten one. At first, I thought maybe it would be softer than my grandfather's threat, but it wasn't. She wrote, "You're our only granddaughter. We want the best for you. This man will ruin your life. If you choose him, you're choosing a hard road, and you're choosing it without us. I folded the letter and shoved it in a drawer. I couldn't even look at it without feeling like my insides were being ripped apart. David tried to stay strong for me. He kept telling me, it's their choice to walk away, not yours. You don't have to feel guilty for loving me. But the truth was, I did. Because every time I looked at him, I saw my future. And every time I thought about my grandparents, I saw my past slipping away. It felt like standing on a cliff edge, staring at two paths below, both terrifying. And then, just when I thought I couldn't feel any more torn, something happened that pushed me even closer to the breaking point. I got invited to Sunday dinner at my grandparents' house. Alone. They said they needed to talk things through one last time. And I agreed to go. When I pulled into their driveway, I had no idea what kind of ambush was waiting for me inside. The moment I stepped into my grandparents' house that Sunday, I knew something was off. The smell of roast chicken usually made the place feel warm and comforting, but this time it felt heavy, suffocating. The dining room table was set for 3, not 4. No space for David. Just me sandwiched between the people who raised me, as though nothing had happened. Sit, my grandmother said, her voice firm but cold. I obeyed. We ate in near silence, forks scraping against plates, the occasional cough from my grandfather, the clock ticking on the wall. It all sounded too loud, too sharp. Finally, my grandmother put down her fork and looked straight at me. We're going to say this once, and only once, she began. Her tone was like steel. If you marry him, you are no longer part of this family. I swallowed hard, my chest burning. Grandma, she held up her hand. Listen, we've been good to you. We raised you when no one else would. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By spitting in our faces? My voice cracked as I said, I'm not spitting in your faces. I love him, that's all. Love fades, my grandfather muttered. Blood doesn't. I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. Why can't you just see him for who he is? He's kind, he's hardworking, he loves me. Isn't that enough? But they just stared at me, their silence louder than any answer they could have given. And then my grandmother said something that cut deeper than anything before. If you walk down that aisle with him, don't bother coming back here. We won't be at your wedding, we won't meet your children. As far as we're concerned, you won't exist. The words hit me like a slap. My fork clattered against my plate. I wanted to scream, to run out the door, to collapse into a heap on the floor, but instead I sat frozen, my body trembling as their ultimatum echoed in my head. When I finally found my voice, it came out broken. Then maybe you don't exist to you already. I grabbed my coat and stumbled out the door, my vision blurred with tears. As I reached my car, I heard my grandmother's voice calling after me, sharp and angry. You'll regret this. The words followed me all the way home, clawing at my chest, burrowing into my mind. By the time I walked through the door of my apartment, David was waiting. One look at my face and he knew. He pulled me into his arms, whispering, You don't have to choose. I'll stand by you. But the truth was, I did have to choose. And no matter which way I turned, I was going to lose someone I loved. What I didn't know then was that the choice was about to be made for me, because 2 days later, my grandmother showed up unannounced, and this time, she didn't come to talk. There was a knock at the door, sharp and fast, like someone trying to break it down. I opened it, and there she was, my grandmother, standing in the hallway with her purse clutched tight, her eyes burning with the kind of fire I hadn't seen since I was a kid getting scolded for sneaking cookies. Can I come in? She asked. It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside, my stomach sinking. David was in the kitchen, making coffee. The moment he saw her, his whole body stiffened. He wiped his hands on a towel, straightened his shirt, and gave her a polite smile. Hello, Mrs. Carter. She didn't answer. She just gave her a look so cold it could have frozen the air between them. Sit down, she told me, pointing to the couch. I sat. David hesitated, then sat beside me, his hand finding mine. She watched the way our fingers laced together, her lips pressing tighter. Finally, she spoke. You think this is love, but it's not. It's rebellion, it's foolishness, and it's going to ruin you. Grandma, I started, but she raised her hand sharply, silencing me. You don't understand the kind of life you're choosing. People will talk, people will judge, and you'll bring shame to this family. David's voice was calm, steady. With all due respect, ma'am, I love your granddaughter. I'd never hurt her. I want to build a life with her. She turned to him, eyes narrowing. You think love is enough? You'll never fit in this family. Never. And if you cared about her, you'd walk away. The room went silent. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. But David didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on my hand and said, I won't leave her. That was it. My grandmother's face flushed with anger. She stood, her voice shaking with fury. Then you leave me no choice. I stood too, panic rising. What are you talking about? She pointed at me, her finger trembling. If you marry him, don't come to our funeral, don't call us, Don't send letters. We will cut you completely off, and you'll regret it. Every single day. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she turned and stormed out before I could respond. The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. I stood there shaking, David's arm around me, and for the first time, I wondered if this war wasn't just about them disapproving. It felt like they were willing to destroy me to keep me away from him, and I had no idea how far they would go. Because the very next morning, I got a phone call that made my blood run cold. The phone rang early in the morning, before the sun was even up. My heart jumped when I saw the caller ID, my grandfather. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I had to. When I picked up, his voice was sharp, urgent. "You need to come over right now," he said. "Your grandmother isn't well, and if you care about her at all, you'll come alone." The line went dead before I could reply. David stirred beside me. "Who was that?" I hesitated, then said, "Grandpa, he says Grandma's sick." "I'll come with you," David offered immediately, already reaching for his clothes, but the words echoed in my head. "Come alone." I think I should go by myself," I whispered. The drive to their house felt endless. The morning air was heavy with fog. The world outside was blurred and gray, like it was holding its breath. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Both their cars were there, but the house was completely dark. I knocked once, then again. Finally, my grandfather opened the door. His face was grim, his eyes hard. "Where's Grandma?" I asked, stepping inside quickly. "She's in the living room," he said flatly. I walked in and froze. She was sitting there, on the couch, perfectly fine, her hands folded in her lap. Not sick, not weak, just watching me with that same cold stare. "What is this?" I whispered. Grandpa shut the door behind me with a heavy thud. "This," he said slowly, "is your last chance." The words hung in the air like a noose. They weren't bluffing this time. I could feel it. The way they looked at me like I was a stranger, like I had already betrayed them beyond repair, it wasn't just anger anymore. It was final. "Leave him," my grandmother said. Her voice was low, shaking with fury. "Or leave us forever." Something inside me broke. I looked at them, these two people who had raised me, who had held my hand on my first day of school, who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had been the closest thing to parents I ever had. And I realized they weren't asking me to choose love or family. They were asking me to choose fear. My hands shook as I whispered, "Then I guess this is goodbye." The silence that followed was suffocating. My grandmother's face twisted with rage. My grandfather's jaw clenched tight. Neither of them spoke as I walked out the door. But just as I stepped outside, I heard her voice cut through the air, cold and venomous. "You'll regret this until the day you die." I slammed the door behind me, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face as I ran to my car. And when I drove away, shaking, I knew there was no turning back. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that their fight to keep us apart wasn't over. It was only beginning. It had been 3 weeks since I walked out of my grandparents' house for the last time. David and I tried to move forward, planning our future, talking about the wedding, pretending we were stronger than the storm behind us. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name, written in my grandmother's sharp, careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single photo. It was of me and David sitting together at a small cafe the night before. The picture was taken from outside, through the window. And scrawled on the back in thick black ink were 5 words that made my blood run cold. "We're always watching. Choose wisely."